Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take fascinating material, you, our listeners, send in and explore the most interesting angles to give you a quick understanding of what's really going on.
And today we're tackling a particularly, well, unusual submission. It's from our listener, the learner. We're diving into a YouTube transcript. It claims to document a hypnotic investigation.
Okay.
And the focus, Pope Francis.
Yeah, this one definitely, it stood out when it landed in the inbox. We're talking about claims that they really grab your attention, but they also feel like they're coming from somewhere completely different,
Absolutely. And it's really vital we remember what we're doing here.
Yeah, good point.
We are not validating, any of the claims in this transcript. Our mission is simply to understand the content.
Right,
what's being presented, what the supposed findings are, and just look at it analytically.
And given how sensitive the topic is, politically, religiously, our approach has to be purely informational, no taking sides.
Exactly. We're just looking at the source.
So what kind of rabbit hole does this hypnotic investigation actually lead us down? Well, okay, get ready. We're talking about asserted revelations about Pope Francis's death date. A really vivid description of his DNA apparently recalled under hypnosis.
Wow, okay.
Where he supposedly goes after death, according to this session. Prophecies linked to his papacy. And even some alleged, inside information about the next conclave.
A lot to unpack there.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with that, very strange claim about his DNA.
Right. So according to the transcript under hypnosis, the subject described Pope Francis's DNA as very composed.
Composed?
Yeah, and a hybrid of numerous species. What's fascinating, I think, regardless of the claim itself, is the specific imagery they used.
Exactly. We're talking reptile.
Yeah.
Grasshopper, insect. Falconoid-like, birds of prey, and feline. Quite the combination.
It really is. And then the subject reported the sensation of the DNA diluting or dissolving into the ether.
Dissolving into the ether. That's a strange image, isn't it? Like fundamental building blocks, just losing their form.
That's how it sounds. The transcript mentions it becoming part of that all and that nothing at the same time. You could maybe interpret that, just within the context of hypnosis, as a feeling that this person's essence isn't easily, categorized or defined.
And the visual descriptions were apparently full of contrast, too. The subject saw conflicting facial images.
Yeah, one described as angelical, the other satanic. Constantly shifting, like one trying to mask the other.
What could that represent, do you think, even if we just take it purely symbolically?
Well, that kind of stark duality, it's a common theme, right, in lots of stories. Often represents inner conflict or maybe perceived opposing forces tied to a person.
Okay.
And the description of light scattering either as revelation or rejection of the DNA, that adds another layer. It's complex symbolism, potentially.
Then there was that really striking analogy.
Yeah.
An explosion where energy divides, but then it reforms. Kind of like Mercury.
Yeah, the Mercury analogy is definitely evocative. It suggests maybe a kind of resilience or an ability to reform even after being broken apart.
Interesting.
If you think about why that image might come up, it could symbolize some kind of enduring quality they're attributing to him.
Okay.
Now, the transcript then shifts focus. It moves to the alleged location of Pope Francis after death, according to this session.
Right, and this part went into some pretty vivid territory. The initial vision was him in white robes, approaching what they called Catacombs of fire with orange walls.
Catacombs of fire.
But, and this is crucial, the fire apparently wasn't real. He was heading towards some kind of meeting.
And the transcript emphasizes this internal struggle he supposedly has.
Yeah.
Wanting to go, but also not wanting to go. Being drawn by an iman, a magnet.
Ah, okay. So compelled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That conflict, even in this described vision, it suggests a sense of being pulled towards a destiny he might not fully embrace himself.
And the journey was described as slow, heavy towards these catacombs. Inside, the scene was, unexpected. An opening revealing cascades of dust sand.
Dust and sand, not fire.
No, definitely not your typical vision of an afterlife.
That shift is quite striking, isn't it? From fire to dust. It could symbolize maybe a transition from something intense to something more, barren or timeless.
Possibly. And the statues present are also a really key element of the scene they describe.
Oh, yeah. What kind of statues?
Well, a devil, like the Catholic depiction, a reptile, a grasshopper, a wolf, and even Egyptian figures.
Wow, that's adverse. It sounds less like a conventional religious afterlife and more like a museum of symbols.
Kind of. It's described as a vast temple, arches, columns.
Okay.
But the lights are weird. They're like neon, but not electrical.
Non-electrical neon. Okay. That adds to the strangeness. It's blending familiar architecture with something really quite alien.
Right. And the narrative keeps going. The subject then apparently saw a circle with different essences or beings, sort of mirroring the statues from before.
Okay, so the statues represented these beings. Seems like it. And Pope Francis, in this vision, arrives to join them. There's a throne waiting for him.
Ah.
But he still has that feeling of discomfort, like he's not content.
Still uneasy. So what might the presence of all these, diverse symbolic figures suggest within the context of this claim, I mean?
That's a good question. Interpreting symbols like that is always tricky.
Yeah.
But maybe the mix of figures from different traditions could represent, even just in the story they're telling, a convergence. Like different influences coming together, or maybe a perspective that goes beyond traditional religious lines.
And his continued unease adds another layer, suggesting maybe a lack of fulfillment even in this supposed post-mortem scenario.
Exactly. Okay, so next we move into the realm of prophecy, specifically the alleged date of Pope Francis's death.
Right, this is where it gets predictive. The date mentioned is Monday, April 21st, 2025.
Which obviously is still in the future for us right now.
Correct. And according to the hypnotic session, this date is symbolic. It's linked somehow to the number 3.
3. How so? Is it the day of the week or?
It's not fully spelled out, but the claim is this date has significance for some unspecified legion and for Catholics.
Okay.
Supposedly it's seen as a culmination happening after Holy Week, and the idea of closing cycles comes up.
Right, closing cycles and the start of new changes in the Vatican and globally.
That's the claim.
And the imagery gets pretty intense here too. This idea of portals opening and staying open.
Yeah.
Becoming like airports for increased transit.
That's a powerful metaphor for change, isn't it?
It really is.
It definitely suggests, within this prophecy's framework, a period of increased connection or maybe exchange between different, let's say, states or realms. And the asserted need for the Catholic Church to renovate and innovate, because it's perceived as weakening or losing energy, that sets the stage for these big future shifts they talk about.
Then there's that really unexpected image.
Yeah.
A head like an iguana representing Vatican symbols.
Yeah, that one's striking. A far cry from traditional iconography.
And the reason given is this integration of diverse beliefs. They draw a comparison to early Christianity, supposedly incorporating pagan elements. The claim is that existing integration will become, like, official, ushering in new beliefs for a new era.
So if such a shift were actually to happen, what would the underlying motivations be, according to this source?
Well, that leads right into the alleged hidden meaning behind this death date prediction.
Okay.
The ideas of rebirth, innovation, integrating new beliefs, those are repeated. But then the transcript talks about empowering people through rituals, but with a catch. It's creating the illusion of self-achieved goals.
Illusion? How so?
The examples given are quite specific. Things like bathing in a well, anointing yourself with blessed oil, repeating certain words to get employment.
Right.
But the key point, according to the source, is that this empowerment is portrayed as basically deceptive because these entities, whoever they are still said to need to feed off human energy.
Okay, so it's not genuine empowerment.
That's the claim. And to extract more of this energy, there's a supposed plan to use female power more prominently within the church.
Why female power specifically?
Because of a claimed decline in practicing Catholics. They throw out a figure down to 30% compared to the last century.
Wow, 30%. That's a huge alleged drop.
If true, yeah. So in this narrative, the Pope's death and all the changes that follow, they're framed as a kind of resurrection of the church.
A resurrection?
And the claim is that Pope Francis has actually left behind legacies, writings, changed protocols, stuff to guide this new beginning.
And then we get back to that octopus image, don't we?
We do. The church's tentacles trying to embrace the whole earth, reaching places like Japan, China.
Right. But importantly, the transcript says these tentacles don't fully cover the globe. There are gaps left.
Yeah, what might those gaps signify, you think, within this context?
Maybe limitations? Areas where this supposed encompassing power just doesn't reach, according to the session.
That makes sense. Okay, now let's look at the claimed interpretation of the prophecy of the last pope.
Right, this ties directly to that octopus power idea. It suggests a kind of handing over of power through alliances
Mm-hmm.
and the creation of this new doctrine they mentioned. But it's not portrayed as like an immediate end to the papacy itself.
No, the transcript suggests more of a gradual decline over at least 3 decades, maybe more. The church gets absorbed by these new alliances.
Okay.
And that idea of self-empowerment through deception comes up again, described as a long-standing method, millennia old, of drawing on human energy.
And there's that analogy. Animals trying to escape a vase, needing to change strategies every 1,000 years.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to frame it, isn't it?
It is.
It suggests this ongoing need to adapt methods of, well, control, according to the source material,
Okay.
and the claimed integration of beliefs related to extraterrestrials. That's a pretty significant development in this narrative.
How are they presented?
As fragmented aspects of themselves. It's a bit esoteric.
Okay. So the alleged Vatican decision to align with these new beliefs, it's framed as a strategy.
Yeah, a way to consolidate energy, to prevent the sheep, as they put it, from scattering.
But the prediction is that these new entities will eventually supplant the Vatican.
That's the claim. With that current 30% of practicing Catholics being replaced over time, it's a major predicted shift.
So what about resistance? Does the transcript address that?
It does, sort of. It says the older 30% represent generations with traditional beliefs, but younger generations, they have different beliefs or they aren't actively engaged with Catholicism anyway. And the closure of seminaries and convents is mentioned as evidence of a crisis.
Right.
It emphasizes the claimed importance of nuns' energy in sustaining the church. There's this image of a dinosaur being maintained by their prayers.
A dinosaur maintained by prayers, that's certainly memorable.
It is. And the conclusion of this section is pretty blunt. They supposedly didn't know how to take care of the business despite millennia of control.
Wow. Okay, let's move on then. The interpretation of a Latin text and the supposed fall of Rome.
Yeah, this ties into that decline of the Vatican they've been talking about. Now it's described as a 7-headed Medusa losing its heads.
7 heads. Symbolizing what?
Alliances, apparently, with various power structures, political, economic, health, things like that, used to manipulate the population.
Okay, and these heads are falling off.
Falling, being dragged away, disappearing, and changing into a petroleum-like substance. Chapapote, the Spanish word used.
Petroleum. That definitely echoes that earlier description of Pope Francis's essence dissolving, doesn't it?
It really does. The parallel is quite striking. It suggests this common theme of decline or dissipation of influence across different parts of the narrative.
And the claim is that Pope Francis is still, like, visually present, but without his core essence.
That's what it says. And the scene inside the Vatican itself is depicted as one of turmoil.
Turmoil, how?
People taking away treasures, activity in underground tunnels or catacombs. And then there's this rather disturbing claim about beasts being released. Yeah, by individuals who are departing. Sort of leaving chaos behind because they feel less favored in these new alliances that are forming.
That's dark.
And it gets darker. There's mention of live but zombie-like children allegedly drained of blood.
Oh, that's very unsettling.
Extremely. The transcript also lists other contents within the Vatican books, libraries, symbols, parchments, and old alien technology, like a museum of strange things.
Alien tech. Okay, so let's shift to the claimed geopolitical situation after Pope Francis. What's the prediction there?
Further weakening of the Vatican's political authority, something the transcript suggests is already happening.
Alpha.
It cites the shift in the constitutional status of countries that used to be officially Catholic. They aren't anymore.
Right, that has happened in some places.
So while there might still be cultural or faith-based respect, politically it's described as diminishing.
And there's a claim about Pope Francis removing Roman from Catholic Apostolic Roman.
Yeah, presented as an attempt to gain more flexibility, broader appeal. But the overall prediction remains one of declining Vatican influence in the future.
Okay, what about the next leader?
Initially expected to be received with force, apparently, but then supposedly loses support as people's beliefs change. The adaptation to new situations comes up again, using technology to connect with younger generations, focusing on what they call hybrid individuals, said to be more drawn to tech than traditional spirituality.
And there's an idea these hybrids might not even need essences.
Exactly. Which is a pretty significant departure from the earlier stuff about feeding off energy.
It is.
Okay.
This leads us into the esoteric information about the next conclave.
Right. The alleged search is on for a strategic person, someone who can reach distant regions, specifically Africa and Asia, where the Catholic population is smaller.
Makes sense strategically in a way.
And the historical pattern of popes coming from different regions is noted. Italy, then other parts of Europe, then America, framing this next step as potentially a kind of last resort strategy.
And the claim is very strong. The selection is strategic, not random chance.
Definitely. And according to the transcript, the next pope's selection was planned even before Pope Francis's supposed death.
So the whole waiting for the white smoke, that's just theater.
That's the assertion. It describes this dynamic between the old guard, the Vatican establishment, and this new buyer or influence. Requires negotiation, compromise.
Like a business deal almost.
Kind of. The analogy of early Christianity incorporating existing beliefs comes up again, suggesting a similar integration of New Age ideas might happen now to attract followers.
Examples.
Things like combining Catholic practices with belief in essences for attracting money, stuff like that.
Wow. And there was even a sort of tongue-in-cheek mention of creating a new saint.
Yeah, Santo Bitcoin. That certainly reflects current trends in a surprising way.
It does. What else about the next pope?
Well, the transcript mentions a dilemma. The possibility of a female pope, a papisa, was considered, but there's hesitation currently.
Interesting.
A vision of 3 candidates is described, one from Africa, but apparently not of Black ethnicity.
Okay.
The selection is ultimately portrayed as this power dynamic between the old and new forces based on their needs and influence.
We even get a brief description.
Yeah, of the next pope. Not very old, medium build, somewhat robust, and a fleeting impression of the name Gregorio, but with moving letters, possibly suggesting some kind of energy manipulation around the name itself.
Gregorio.
Okay.
That's quite the collection of alleged inside info.
It is. Finally, the transcript includes a section labeled Parte ya Libre, a free part, questions directed at Diana, the hypnotic subject.
Ah, okay. What do they ask her?
First, about Pope Francis's childhood connections to these energies.
And the answer.
The claim is that popes are chosen, not self-made, and they're accompanied by a reptilian energy from a young age.
Reptilian energy again.
Yeah. Direct physical visits by entities are denied, but it suggested Francis could see them and developed extrasensory abilities. It also claims he wasn't a saint. Alleged issues of abuse, both given and received a connection to St. Augustine, involvement in sex, rituals.
Quite a claim. What else?
A question about contact with alien spacecraft, the one supposedly in the Vatican.
Right, the tech mentioned earlier.
Physical contact is denied again, but astral travel to the ships is suggested.
For what purpose?
Conversations, organization, dealing with papers, archives, roundtable meetings apparently, all on the astral plane inside these ships.
Okay. And interacting with strong entities.
The response there is that interactions are between equals due to lineage. So no energetic attacks, but rather power struggles, envy among themselves. It paints a picture of a certain hierarchy.
A hierarchy of these entities.
Okay.
Then there's an interpretation of an alleged quote from Pope Francis.
Yes, something about trusting each other because of new life forms, adapting to new customs.
And how is that interpreted in the session?
Basically as summarizing the whole thing. New leadership. Open portals for new species, new beliefs, a new era, recognizing extraterrestrials, hybrid beings, overall biodiversity, but not just earthly biodiversity.
And the reptile visual again.
Yeah, the strong visual of lizards or reptiles is mentioned again right there.
Okay. Final question in that section.
About the alleged departure of entities. The claim is they are leaving Earth, but leaving behind what they created.
Leaving their creations. And then it talks about Diana's state.
Yeah, just briefly. Her desire to leave the group, her discomfort, suggests maybe a follow-up session was needed. Instructions for her to return to the present are noted. And her comment right at the end is interesting. She apparently said only her back was visible during the session.
Her back? That's an intriguing detail about her own experience of it all.
It certainly adds a personal, slightly strange dimension to these already extraordinary claims.
Well, that was indeed a deep dive. Phew. To recap, we've explored a truly wide-ranging and, let's be honest, highly unconventional set of claims, all originating from this YouTube transcript of a purported hypnotic investigation into Pope Francis.
And just to reiterate, as we said at the start, our focus has been solely on understanding the content of the source you send in, the learner. We're not here to confirm or deny the assertions made within it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there were definitely some surprising elements, weren't there? Moments that made you pause and think, just in terms of the sheer narrative being constructed in this material.
Oh, for sure. It certainly gives you food for thought. Lots of it.
It really does.
And maybe that's the takeaway for you, the listener. Consider the potential interpretations, maybe how these sorts of claims fit into broader cultural conversations or anxieties. Engage your own critical thinking.
Yeah, definitely approach it with that critical lens. A huge thank you again to the learner for sending in such, well, fascinating material. It certainly gave us a lot to unpack.
It did indeed.
And please stay tuned for future deep dives into other listener-provided sources. Until next time.